Hello, this is Skylar Mitchell, and I'll be talking about the course EDAC 634, um, Perspectives of an Adult Learner. So, just an outline of what I'll be talking about in this video is what did I learn from the class, what are some things that I appreciated and enjoyed about the class, and lastly, what are some suggestions I have for future students. So, in summary, there are a few topics that we talked about in this course, and so I'm going to go through each of those and just give a brief description. So, talking about andragogy is the first one, and what andragogy means is it's the study of how we teach adults. And so, the question is, how do we treat teaching adults different from children? So, I've listed out some things, but the main things are we have more respect for their independence, responsibility, and their self-directed nature. So adults are very goal and task-oriented as opposed to subject-oriented learners. They have more experience in life, and they're very internally motivated by a desire to develop themselves. There's also McCluskey's theory of margin, which describes a balance between what's called power and load. Power is the ability to and the resources you have to overcome what is called the load. The load is your responsibilities and the demands that are placed on you. Eastern and Indigenous perspectives. So that's another topic we talked about. Mainly, we learned all types of these different perspectives and how they are affected by religion and culture. And so one of the ones that focused on more intently on was Hindu, and I researched how they use oral traditions, music, parables, games, and ceremonies. And so they use as well different sensory experiences such as seeing and touching in their learning. And so really the focus of looking at these different cultures was to reflect on how we can apply those in our strategies to teach adults. And so one way we can apply the Hindu way of learning things is the way in which we take the sensory or more tactile ways of learning things and apply them in our teaching to adults. Next is one of the most popular learning theories, which is Kolb's experiential learning. And so the idea here is that we learn through experience, and so we bring some sort of experience to the table, which is some sort of feeling, some gut feeling. So the example I used in our project was if we're designing something, whether you feel this is a good design or a bad design based off your past experiences. Then this leads into reflective observation, where we are looking at and thinking about, and this leads us into more abstract conceptualization, thinking about specifically what are we doing with what we learned, and how are we going to put that into doing or some sort of active experimentation. All right, so adult education also touches on transformational learning, is something we talked about. So according to Mazero's psychocritical approach, there are basically 10 phases. You go through a disorienting dilemma as a learner, and we can apply this to adults where maybe the example I used was maybe you get an email saying, oh, you responded poorly to some sort of fake scam email that basically you are enrolled into some sort of remediation course to help better your cybersecurity practices. And so if you're in that situation, you have this disorienting dilemma where you are faced with trying to overcome your past assumptions. You go through examination, and This eventually leads to exploring alternatives, assessing what you knew, and reacclimating that new knowledge. And then you're going to experiment with different roles and try to build competence using the new knowledge that you have. Next, we talked about critical theory, postmodern and feminist perspectives. Critical theory includes some Marxist traditions aiming towards liberating people by transforming social inequality, and it relies on some Marxist principles, which I have listed there. Postmodernism is, meanwhile, the belief that there's not any universal truth. The main thing I took away from that is sometimes that can lead students to, if we rely too much on the ideals of postmodernism, like uncertainty, ambiguity, diversity, multiplicity, then that could lead students into having too many options, and then there's some stress, unnecessary stress on making that choice for students. And then lastly, feminist theory, that's talking about comparing status of men and women and aiming to better women's lives, respectively. So in these ways, these are different theories we learned that we can apply. And then lastly, we have embodied learning, which emphasizes 4 parts. So mainly focusing with the movement of the body. Next, sensory, using our senses. Affective, how do our emotions play into it? And spiritual, meaning what meaning am I making through my experiences and in tune with that. And so embodied, spiritual, and then there's narrative learning, which involved storytelling and conveying lessons being taught through either historical lens or some sort of narrative where we engage the minds of the listeners. And so looking at all of these topics, there are just a lot of ways in which we as teachers of future adults can take what they have experience-wise and use these different ways in which we can engage them effectively. So some feedback about the course, things that I liked about the course. I wanted to go through how well I appreciated the schedule being laid out and how it allowed for flexibility. I also appreciated the consistency of the assignments. So there were similar expectations for each assignment, which I thought was really nice. Alternating between discussion posts and projects, I think, really helped me to stay productive and consistent, so that was greatly appreciated as well. I also appreciated the summaries you provided. I think that was one of the main things that helped me to recall what I had already read, helped me then to organize my thoughts and retain that information. And another thing that I liked was the option to work together independently depending on what worked best for us. And then lastly, feedback on projects was really helpful when you would type in the blue text. The only negative things I had about the course were very small. Sometimes I would run into some dead links that didn't work, and sometimes I felt it was beneficial to go ahead and do a Google search if I didn't understand a topic. What suggestions do I have for future students? I would just update any links that are not current, organize. This is just a personal preference of mine, but I'd prefer things organized by topic rather than the type of media. And then lastly, include more specialized resources. Specifically, I thought for embodied learning. So what tips do I have for future students? Main thing I would say is I would get the textbook on day 1 and make sure that is ready to go. I would look at student examples to understand project format. And lastly, I would make a template to make to align with your first project, to make sure you are able to do that and understand how it's formatted. Thank you very much.